In this video segment, we're going to take a look at the process of creating a custom wine cabinet. On the right hand side of your screen, you can see a photo of the inspiration for the cabinet that we want to create. And then on the left hand side of your screen, I've actually gone through the process and created that cabinet. On the right hand side, I have a regular base cabinet that I've placed. And then on the left hand side, the one that we've already created. I'm going to show you the steps in the process. And the first thing I'm going to do is I want to take some of the properties off of the finished wine cabinet and apply it onto the generic base cabinet on the right hand side. There's a tool that I like to use called the Object Eyedropper. Once I select that and I select the object that I'm interested in matching some of the properties, I can then use the scoping tool to figure out what those things are. And to begin with, I want to take the handle, the countertop material off of that cabinet and use those two properties so I don't have to spend time figuring out what those components are. So let's clear all of the selected items, type in the word handle, and then we'll select those two items, and then we'll also go in and find the countertop or the materials that this cabinet is using. So select the countertop material, the box material, maybe the drawer material, and those components there. Select OK, and now I'll apply that to the cabinet that we want. Looks like I missed the toe kick, so we'll just use the material eyedropper, pick up that component, and spray it on that object. The next step is to open up the cabinet and make various changes to it. Let's begin with the sizing. I'm going to change the depth from the 24 inches to 12 inches. Next is a toe kick. I really don't need a toe kick, but I'm going to end up using this for the bottom of the box. I'm going to set this at 2 3/4 inches. And notice each time I press the Tab key, the preview updates. Now for the next setting, let's take a look at the box construction. I'm going to change the default to be a framed box, and I'm going to use a separation of 1 inch. And for the overlay, I'm going to change that to be an inset. On the front of the cabinet, let's click. That will change the panel. I'm going to change that face item from a right door to an opening. So we'll come down here, choose opening, and then on the item height for the opening, I'm going to adjust that to 22 inches and a quarter. Notice in this setting here, it's locked from auto resize. That means that if I make any changes to, say, the drawer above, make it smaller, it will not grow and it will not shrink the face item that we've locked. This is very useful if you're using it for a specific appliance or an item that you do not want to be resized. Well, the next change is to specify the shelves. I actually want to make that manual, and I'm going to set the number of shelves to 0. Again, you press the Tab key, see that update, select OK for that shelf, and in our preview that shelf goes away. On the side of the cabinet, let's change it to the right side. We'll use the orbit camera and turn around. I want to put a panel on this side. For the item type, I'm going to use a custom face, and I'm just going to change that custom face from a blank area to a door panel, which you'll find here. Remember, my box is using an inset door style, so that will be an inset door panel. If you're using a box that does not have inset styles and you want your panel to be inset, you can choose the item down here at the bottom of the dialog for a panel inset. Let's go ahead and select our door panel. And in this case, I'm going to change that door panel item height to be 29 inches because I'm going to put a molding at the bottom here and I don't want that to get covered up. If you look at the preview, my door panel is right at the top of the cabinet. The front of the cabinet has a separation. Let me go in and let's add a new separation. Select OK. And let's just move that up. And now that separation's there. It looks like it's a little bit off because I've got another separation in there. So I'm just going to modify that. Let's try 7/8 of an inch, and that slides that up. Now you can repeat that process for the left side and the back side if you want panels on those portions of the cabinet. The next thing I'm going to do is on the bottom of the cabinet, I'm going to put a molding, and that will cover up the toe kick. So let's go to the moldings. I'm going to choose a rectangular molding style, and we'll set the dimension of that molding profile to be 4 inches high. We'll leave it at 5 inches thick, and I'm going to move it to the bottom. Now you'll notice that on the bottom of the cabinet, it's actually competing with the toe kick. And what I need to do in that case is go back to the general panel, and on the toe kick depth, I'd forgotten to change that. I'm going to set that to be 0, press the tab key, and you can now see that. Again, the purpose for leaving the toe kick in there is to have that bottom panel, which would allow us to rest the wine rack inside of there. So close the dialog and take a look. And the last thing I'm going to use is the material eyedropper. Pick up the box material and apply that onto the molding that we've placed. So for the most part, I've been able to replicate the cabinet that we've already created. I've got a little bit different door panel on the final cabinet, but you can browse into the library and choose any door panel that you want and apply that onto the cabinet box. Alright, now the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to create the rack for the wine itself. I'm going to do this through an elevation view. Back into the plan view, let's just shoot an elevation through the cabinets and off to the side over here, pan over. I'm going to use the polyline solid and I'm going to click and drag a polyline solid. While I'm doing this, I'm just going to press the tab key and then I'm going to set the dimensions. 22 inches by 22 inches. That way I don't have to come in and set the dimensions later, save me a step. I'm going to set the thickness of it to be 3 inches. Now that creates the main component for the wine rack. Now I'm going to create rectangular cutouts for that. And again, I'm going to use the same tool, Polyline Solid tool, and I'm just going to come over here roughly, and again I'm going to create and press the tab key one that is 3.5 inches by 3.5 inches. I came up with those dimensions by looking at the average wine bottle, and there's a couple different sizes, but that's the one that's going to work for me. Once I have that in place, I'm now going to position that 3/4 of an inch from each side. So I'm just going to zoom in here, type in 3/4 of an inch. Make sure you use the move handle. Select enter, and I'll do the same thing for the top. And I'm going to set that at 3/4 of an inch. Again, use the move handle versus the move both ends versus move object. I'm going to move object. Select OK, and now that is exactly positioned where I want it. Slide back over. Let me turn off my temporary dimensions because it gets pretty messy. I'm going to select that polyline solid that we had, open it up, and there is an option to make that a hole. Select that, and that's going to now punch a hole inside of the main wine rack. I'm going to select that hole, use the multiple copy, and I'm going to use the dimension of 4.25 inches for a primary offset and the same amount for a secondary offset. Now this is called an array copy maneuver. I'm going to hold down the right mouse button and just keep it held down. When I let go, I'm going to now just move the mouse down, and when I'm finished I'm going to left click, and that completes that operation of the array copy. Okay, so I'm going to do that one more time. I'm going to press Ctrl Z on the keyboard so you can see that again. Again, select the object, multiple copy, set the dimensions, which I already have set, and then I'm going to hold the right mouse button down, keep it held down, slide it over, let go, pull it down, and then left click. That is called the array copy, and it's pretty powerful to use it for a variety of things, your electrical, in placing can lights, and in this case for our wine rack. Now that I have the basic cage for the wine rack, let's just position it into place. I'm going to use a tool called point-to-point move. You'll find this in your lower edit menu. Select the point-to-point move. Click on the point that I want to move and click where I want to move that. And now I'm actually going to return to the plan view so I can position it into place in this direction. We'll just slide that up into place, and you'll notice in my completed one I added a dashed line for that since it's underneath the cabinet countertop. You can do that just by going into your line style, changing your line style to dashed, and that way it appears that way. I now have that positioned, and we go back into the elevation view. You can place your wine bottles. Let's open up the library first and type in wine bottle, and I'm just going to go ahead and place that in this view here, approximately where I want it. Let me just slide that over, and then in the elevation view I'll actually now further position that. Slide over here just a little bit. Notice it's actually embedded in the cabinet, so we'll just slide that up, position it where you want. I hold the control key down quite a bit, and I'm going to use that same array copy. Again, that multiple copy still has that same 4.25 inch. Hold the right mouse key down, let go, move up, and click with your left mouse key, and then you can place those wine bottles. If you want to make some variability in your wine rack, you just come in here and drink your bottles of wine up, zoom out, and you can see the way that wine rack looks. Now back over to the 3D view. Probably the last thing I need to do in this component is the default material for the polyline solid that we use to create the rack is a material that we want to change, and I'm going to use a material eyedropper, pick up the material off the handle, and apply that on there. Now we've spent a few minutes creating this cabinet. The other thing you can do is simply block this cabinet and then add it into your library. Select Add to Library, you give it a name, and then you can reuse that wine cabinet in the future just simply by organizing your catalog, coming in and placing it. A lot of times with this wine cabinet, I will add search attributes in here where you can put in some keywords, maybe put in a style, and it will help you find it in the future. So I hope you found this video helpful in creating a custom wine cabinet. Thanks for watching.